So this is my weekly recap on Ukraine, and normally I try to get it done on Sunday or Saturday, generally on Sunday, and sometimes it spills into Monday. So here we go. Let's go back to last Saturday, the 22nd of July, and I'm just going over major headlines, and then I'll touch on some things maybe I haven't touched on over the course of the week. So last Saturday, the Kyiv Post was reporting that for every 100 meters, it costs 4 to 5 men, and when you do the math, it's staggering. Now, it won't be like that forever, but through the trench lines, it's pretty tough. Okay, counteroffensive analysis is sobering. Ukraine attacked the Crimean ammo dump last week. Crimean bridge was closed after a fuel depot was hit in the middle of Crimea, which tells me that they're spooked. RT was listing 7 conditions for the resumption of the grain deal, and Ukraine also hit Belgorod, according to RT, with cluster munitions, giving the suggestion that it was American cluster munitions, but that's not necessarily the case. RT was also saying the IMF issues a warning about global food prices, and the Russians are pretty happy about that as you watch them on TV. 2 Putin allies mysteriously died in 48 hours. Anton Cherkapenevkov, who had a core role in Russia's spying, he had a heart attack at age 40. That was kind of suspicious. And a former government official, Igor Kudarakov, who was found dead in his home on Thursday. So that's what we knew on Saturday. On Sunday, Putin and Lukashenko were talking together. They were getting together talking about how the counteroffensive had failed. Zelensky was pointing to delays in receiving munitions as a huge cause of what was going on with the counteroffensive, and I think he's right. Pence was talking about how President Biden had not explained the case for Ukraine, not explained our national interest case well enough, and he's even more hawkish than Biden is. So for those of you who think Republicans, they're not interested in this, that's not necessarily true. The Trumpian wing is not interested, but the otherwise conservative Reagan kind of wing, like my kind of Republican, we're all in. In fact, we want it to go faster. Unilever company to reply with conscription law if Russia in Russia if their staff is called up. Unilever has not left Russia. They should have, and now you should have been paying attention, Unilever, because a few companies just got nationalized by Russia, and you could have that happen to you. So you should have just cut bait earlier, but they're still doing it because they're chasing the dollar. Monday, the 24th of July, 2023, the Orthodox Russian Church, or Russian Orthodox Church, repeats Moscow's lies about the attack on the church, the missile attack in Odessa. They're just repeating Russia propaganda points. 3 warehouses in Reni were attacked. Now, this is 3 miles from the Romanian border, and it was very close to causing a huge international incident with NATO. Putin signs a digital ruble law, and I don't know enough about that to know whether that's going to be good or bad, but they can use rubles digitally. I think Putin will see that as a step toward de-dollarification. Moscow drone attack on Monday. So it was a big thing, and the footage was there. They were trying to hit what appears to be the Ministry of Defense, and electronic jammed, and so they fell and hit something else. And Russia was vowing a tough response for the attack, and a Ukrainian drone hit an ammo dump in Crimea at the same time. And so they tend to do this Moscow and Crimea thing simultaneously. A Russian colonel who commanded the Leningrad regiment was killed, and so that brings us up to, if you're looking at how many commanders, from 9 to 10, and then even more if you count someone else. Now, one train of thought that I didn't really follow this week, just because we had so much with the drone attacks and the African conference and things along those lines, was that in Ukraine, they're really working on going after corruption. So there is a pro-Russian Ukrainian lawmaker accused of treason, Alexander Ponomarov, from the For Life Party, and he was the target of this. And then there was a former military commissioner that the SBU was also targeting. His name was Yevhen Borisov, who bought property in Spain and luxurious autos worth $4 million during the war. Like, it's just a bad look. I mean, if you were an oligarch before the invasion, that's one thing. If you were acting like an oligarch before it, but since the invasion, it's not going to be tolerated, this kind of behavior. Russia hits the Danube ports. Fox says that some arms are winding up, Fox News in the United States, some arms are winding up in the hands of gangs and traffickers. Now, that's got to be true. I mean, the level of scale that this is going to be happening, but how much, and they didn't talk about how much. And so it just was kind of a puffy piece that really didn't add much to the conversation. RT was saying that Russia rapid growth in military production is moving. And yeah, I think they're trying to do that. I don't think they're going to do very well with it. It'll take a while to get them on a war footing. Pravda was also saying that Ukraine and Poland may unite, said a former United States military man. Who was it? Scott Ritter. Poland and Ukraine may unite. I mean, okay. I don't see that happening, but whatever. Tuesday, July 25th, there was another corruption case. Former Ukrainian MP was notified in absentia of treason. His name was Yevhen Muryov. He used the Nash television channel controlled by him to massively disseminate, and I'm quoting, to massively disseminate Kremlin narratives in the information space of Ukraine. Thus, he purposefully used his own media resource to manipulate Ukrainian public opinion in the interest of Russia, the SBU said on its website on Tuesday morning. Okay, along with that, Zelensky is calling for the destruction of occupiers in all areas. The first task is to destroy the occupiers, their equipment, their supplies, warehouses, headquarters, as much as possible. Not just in the information space, but anywhere. Now, he's been calling for that before, but this is calling for or articulating the change of strategy that we saw about 3 weeks ago. That frontal assault, it wasn't going anywhere. So they came to, let's just destroy their equipment in the back so that we have a chance when we actually do get to a frontal assault. Okay, Pravda, return to the grain deal is impossible, says Pravda. There's this fascinating article about Fedorov. Fedorov is Ukraine's deputy prime minister. He's running the war like a startup, and I was going to do a video about it. I just didn't have the capacity with everything else going on, but it's really clever how Ukraine is so technologically savvy and so agile in what they're doing, and maybe I will do that one on this soon enough. Testimony of Russian soldiers, brutal life for convicts in Ukraine. Kremlin is rejecting UN calls to rejoin the grain deal because for them, they feel like they've got it made. They can destroy Ukrainian grain, and then later on, they're going to tell African and other poor countries, we can get you the grain, but, you know, it'll come with some strings attached. Radio Free Europe was talking about wartime TV in Ukraine. And they were really analyzing, is it about unity or propaganda? And it's on the edge of propaganda. And I applaud Radio Free Europe for the way that they have dealt with that, taking it head on, because it was, there's really not a place for the other side of this. And you've got to be careful. I've got to be careful. I periodically will say, look, I don't like to give you this information, but if I don't give you this information, I'm just one-sided propagandist. So you need to understand that this has gone badly, or this has gone wrong, or this didn't work out, or whatever else. And Ukraine's going to have to walk a fine line in the messaging between becoming propagandist and actually articulating truth, but preventing Russian narratives from overpowering them. And they're away from the line, but it's a little bit too far away from the line, at least right now. And again, I'm not faulting anyone. If I was Zelensky, I'd be extra careful as well right now. Syrskyi, the commander of ground forces, visits combat brigades in Bakhmut. And that's pretty gutsy for someone of that rank to be doing. Of course, Zelensky's done that, and we'll talk about what Zelensky's done since then. The Odessa Cathedral was hit by Russia. I don't believe that it was intended to be hit by Russia. I'm agreeing with Ryan Macbeth, and I talked about that in the video earlier this week. I think it was an accident, not intentional, but it's got the people fired up. And Odessa used to be pretty pro-Russian, and now they're very angrily anti-Russia. Okay, and then the final one, again, the drone strike on Reni near Romania was just very, very dangerous. Wednesday, 26th of July, at the SBI is related to the SBU. I'm not exactly sure. SB Investigative, I think, is what the I is for. Is investigating Yuri Aristov, another corruption issue, servant of the People faction. That's Zelensky's party. So They're really working at this. According to the I'm quoting now, according to the Bureau, as part of the investigation, the SBI officers are investigating how the member of parliament of Ukraine could be on vacation in the Maldives despite the ban on officials from traveling abroad. Like, people, what are you doing? Like, you can't afford this level of corruption. You can't. You've got to wipe it out. You've got to get it out of your culture, out of your system. And to their credit, they're actually doing something about it. RT was talking about Soviet era art and colonists in Africa. We're still trying to grab their resources, but Russia, we've never been colonizing Africa. And they were making big hay of this before the Russia-Africa event in St. Petersburg. Kremlin blames the West for poor turnout at the Russia-Africa summit. It was a lot poorer of a turnout than what it was just 2 years ago, but they still made a lot of they turned that into a lot of really meaningful press accounts. The U.S. will share info on Russian war crimes with Hague. That was huge because this is something the U.S. doesn't generally do because they don't really recognize the authority of the Hague, at least not over U.S. citizens. Counteroffensive push around Bakhmut, it's moving, it's going slowly, but it's moving the right direction. Ukraine takes responsibility for last year's Kerch attack. It's a little late, but we already kind of knew it was you, so it was not a big thing, but yeah, okay. And Moldova expels 45 Russian diplomats. They accuse them of hostile actions over the years, and I'm going to quote again. We agreed on a need to limit the number of accredited diplomats from Russia so that there are fewer people trying to destabilize the Republic of Moldova, Foreign Minister Nicu Popescu said at the cabinet meeting. Yeah, Moldova gets it. Okay, and then finally, the BBC, Western armor struggles against Russian defenses, and they really are struggling. The counteroffensive is really slow and really bloody. I mean, it just is. And to say it's something else like, they're just crushing it, that makes for a great YouTube thumbnail, but that's about all it does. It's not really accurate. Okay, Thursday, the 27th of July, 2023, the Minister of Culture, this is now the fourth guy that's actually dealt with some kind of corruption. He's not corrupt. He's just kind of not the brightest. Here's what happened. So I'm quoting, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has supported the resignation of Alexander Tkachenko from the post of Minister of Culture and Information Policy, co-chair of the European Solidarity faction. Irina Peresco has said. Okay, so what happened with him was he wanted to spend a lot of money on like building a museum or something along those lines, to protect cultural artifacts. That's his gig. Zelensky's saying, like, we're at war. We need all our attention focused on munitions and focused on winning the war. We can do that afterwards. I get it. That's his area. He wants to do well in that area, but he was told to stand down and he didn't want to, so he quit. So he's eventually dismissed. Ukraine claimed to eliminate 590 fighters and shoot down 40 missiles. I'm not sure what that means, because if you eliminated 590, that's great, unless they eliminated more, and we just don't know how many were more on which side. So, but it's some bloody fighting. RT says that Putin pledges grain to Africa, and he did. He pledged free grain to a number of countries, including free shipping of the grain, because he's trying to buy influence in Africa. RT also talked about Russia's increasing energy exports to Africa. I did a whole video on these 2 points just a few days back, and it's worth watching so that you understand how Russia is trying to buy influence. Pravda also talked about Russia's strikes on airfields and warehouses in Ukraine. That brings us to Friday, the 28th of July. So Russia wrote off $23 billion. That's billion with a B, okay? $1 billion worth of African debt. So again, he's trying to buy influence. Now, when the next UN meeting comes up and there's some kind of vote in the UN about whether you're for Ukraine or whether you're for Russia, a lot of these people in Africa are going to get off that neutral part of it and onto the Russian side after something like this, or at least this is what Putin hopes. Danilov says that events in Tagarod, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, are due to Russian air defense incompetence. So the Ukrainians sent some missiles into Russia. They were either deflected, shot down, or whatever, but it still caused some damage in this place called Tagarod. A court chooses a measure of restraint. This is the fifth issue of corruption. Restraint for MP Aristov in the form of personal obligation for making false statements. So I'm quoting now, Astarov in the middle of July was seen at the 5-star Waldorf Astoria Maldives hotel located on the private island in the Maldives. Bad idea. Just stop doing this kind of thing. So Ukraine had a reputation for corruption, and they're proving that they have been doing this kind of thing, but unlike in the past, they're actually doing something to solve this and really crack down, because they can't let this kind of thing go at this point. Chair of the African Union says grain is not enough. We need a ceasefire, which is music to Vladimir Putin's ears, because he wants a ceasefire now while he still controls 4 oblasts. But there's also talk from the other side where I think it was the president of Ethiopia was saying, yeah, we need the grain deal restarted. This is not a good idea. Let's get as much grain going as possible. I'm not sure if it was Ethiopia, Kenya. Forgive me, I'm getting that confused which president said it. But so it's not monolithically supporting Russia, but Putin feels like he had a good week. Russia African summit. I read the full text of the speeches, and president after president after president were saying, in the Soviet days, you guys were behind us, where the West was still trying to colonize us, and so it was all a dog and pony show. We'll see how much sticks. Stefanchuk says that the Constitution does not prohibit elections during martial law. And so they might change it, but they might just keep it, and we'll see an election while the war is going on, which would be really, really interesting. Zelensky asked the Rada to reject the law to allocate 573.9 hryvnia, UAH, that's hryvnia, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the money right, UAH, for a Holodomor museum. They're proposing that. No, don't do it. And he asked, please reject it. And when they didn't reject it, he vetoed it, which is the right choice. That's the correct move while you're asking for munitions to fight the enemy. You can do the Holodomor museum after. Ukraine moves Christmas to December 25th from the Orthodox date, which is about 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks later. And according to RT, at least, I haven't seen Western press about this, but RT is now saying that the Ukrainian church rejects Zelensky's new Christmas. They never cared about the Ukrainian Orthodox Church before, but now all of a sudden they're hot and bothered about it. I'm not sure where I stand on that. I don't like the idea of the state changing the days. I get why they're doing it, but if I was Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox, I don't know that I would like that change, but I mean, that's where we are. The Pentagon says that there's danger pay for U.S. servicemen in Ukraine, and it'll be retroactive to April 24th of 2022. Now, RT carried an article talking about how U.S. servicemen are getting danger combat pay, whatever. Okay, so what's going on there is that there are servicemen, not just a flood of U.S. servicemen into the country, but there are servicemen at embassies, and they're getting this extra pay because they're in a hotter zone. That's all that is. Okay, Odessa is removing statues of folks like Catherine the Great. They're renaming streets, and the reason for that is while they used to lean kind of pro-Russian, they're now really angry with Russia. This past week has been the icing on the cake for Odessa, and it's a whole different thing after the cathedral was hit. Zelensky visited the Transfiguration Cathedral in Odessa, which is gutsy because he did that. I mean, Russia's been bombing Odessa all week, and he did that in spite of that. That brings us to Saturday. Zelensky visits the eastern front lines in Ukraine, and so he's not just visiting Odessa, but other parts of the front lines. I got to give the guy credit. He's got courage few leaders that we know of in the world. It's been 1 year now, Saturday, July 29th. It's been 1 year since the Olenvinka incident where Russia apparently blew up a POW detention center, and they said they've used American HIMARS to blow this place up. It didn't look like that from the photos. It looked like it was blown up from the inside out, not from the outside in. And they're saying we want a UN investigation, but they never let the UN in because Russia lies. Okay, former President Trump was calling for a pause in Ukraine aid until Biden probe is completed. That's the exact wrong move. No. Even if Biden has done something nefarious with Ukraine in the past, let's just for the sake of argument, and I'm not saying that this is, but let's say that happened, it doesn't matter. Ukraine still needs the aid because Russia invaded them, and you don't let that happen. This is stupid. So that's all bad. And then on The same day, RT was carrying a article that Oliver Stone was saying that Biden may start World War III. Oliver Stone's an idiot. He's the guy behind Ukraine on Fire, and he just got a terrible view of Ukraine. But same day, I mean, left and right are both against, but there are minority voices. I hope Trump will be a minority voice of support for Ukraine, or lack of support for Ukraine. Sunday, the 30th of July, drone attack on Moscow. This was overnight, about 3 a.m., and I talked about the details in the very last video that I did, so I'm not going to be, or no, 2 videos ago, so I'm not going to be rehashing that now. You can go back over that. Zelensky says that the war is returning to Russia. He's right. I mean, he's going to try to bring that fight to Russia so that they can feel it. RT said that the Pentagon suffered a critical compromise of some security, but I haven't seen anything in Western press. I'm going to keep my eyes out for that. Business Insider India, through CNN, was talking about a Ukraine sea drone that apparently is very impressive, faster than anything in the Black Sea, and we'll see how that all plays out. And then the African leaders leave the summit, according to the AP, with no Green Deal and still a war in Ukraine. And the AP article left you feeling like, well, it didn't go well for him. I don't know that that's the case. I think that the African leaders that were there were kind of cozy with Putin and happy to get free grain and free shipping for the grain and some free weapons and 23 billion in debt relief. And so for them, I think it was a good visit, and I think Putin will think very much the same thing. But the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see how they vote when it comes to the UN votes that are going to be hopefully, from Putin's perspective, hopefully now less overly weighted for Ukraine. I don't know if it'll happen, but it's something to watch. Okay, those are the events for the week. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. I'll be back tomorrow. Hope you will be too.